Welcome to patch 7.1. This video will cover the changes to Viper, the overall changes and balance of the melee jobs, and briefly summarize the new important content coming with the patch. Let's get started. Since we're a Viper channel, let's start with the changes that Viper got. We got... We got nothing. This came as a shock to me because Viper right now is in a weird spot. Outside of the high-end rating, Viper is pretty solid with consistent damage and a relatively low skill floor, making it accessible for any player. But it starts running into some pretty serious issues at the higher skill levels. Viper is a selfish DPS job, but with the current numbers that we have available right now, we are doing the overall lowest damage, and we have the lowest amount of buff feed, or how much damage you can fit into raid buffs, than any other melee. So I was expecting to get at least some buff, ideally on the Reawaken combo, but no. Even a 20 potency buff to the Generations and Legacies would go a long way to fixing this issue. Or maybe even have Ouroboros be an auto-crit ability like Samurai's Ogi Namakiri. Now I can see the argument with Uncoiled Fury allowing us to keep full uptime at range, having the tuning being a little bit lower, but not this much lower. Being a selfish DPS job and having quote-unquote the bad burst window seems counterintuitive to how 14 combat is designed, with the ever-increasing importance on the 2-minute burst window. Viper's strength lies in its high damaging filler combos and its flexibility to tackle fight mechanics and keep GCD uptime. But none of this really matters that much if we can't make good use of the raid buff multipliers, in which our most optimal burst sequence falls behind compared to other melees. And it isn't even a complete sequence, as we have to use our first Reawaken early to make sure both Ouroboroses land under raid buffs. Slightly buffing the Reawaken combo would have helped fix this issue at the high-end rating scene, and it changes little to nothing everywhere else, as the slight buff will simply bring it more in line with the other melees. Now, since we didn't receive any buffs, I'm genuinely concerned for the upcoming Fru ultimate, but I'll talk about that later. Let's look at the changes the other melees got. Dragoon now has a buff granted from Elusive Jump that increases the potency of Piercing Talon. The number of Nostron charges has also been reduced from 3 to 1. To make up for this, a number of other OGCDs were buffed to compensate for the lost damage. And probably the biggest change? Starcross can now be used from range. Ninjas saw some slight potency increases to Throwing Dagger and Dream Within a Dream. Their raid buff, Dokumori, is now an AoE ability, so make sure you use these in dungeons. Tenchi Jin can also now be used while moving. For Samurai, Hisatsu Gyoten, or your dash, has had its cooldown halved from 10 to 5 seconds. And they also saw some slight potency increases to the combo starter Gyofu and Zenshin. For Reaper, Circle of Sacrifice from Arcane Circle now applies its stacks from any ability used instead of just weapon skills from your allies. And after learning Communio, the other Enshroud skills are now grayed out at 1 Shroud stack to prevent you from dropping Communio by accident. When it comes to melee balance, there are 2 outstanding issues, Viper and Reaper. Unfortunately, both my favorite jobs. Both of these jobs saw 0 potency changes, while the other melees, except for Monk who was already in a comparatively better spot, have been buffed. This further separates the gap between the melees, so essentially it's a nerf. Now, this is really only significant for the top 5% of players. The lower damage of Viper and Reaper won't stop you from clearing the Savage tier or other content in the game currently. Where it might be a problem is in Ultimate. I do have hope for Viper and Fru because of how well Reaper played in both DSR and Top last expansion. Reaper was able to pool gauge in phases where damage wasn't needed in order to absolutely smash through the harder DPS checks in other phases. I think Viper will see the same, Because it plays similar to Reaper in that much of its damage can be pulled and shifted over, the difference is our filler GCDs pack more of a punch than any other melee. Outside of the burst windows, Viper can do some pretty sizable damage, and Reawaken packs a sizable amount of potency in a very brief window. The difference though, is that Viper has 4 buffs to upkeep in order to get the maximum amount of damage, and maintaining these buffs becomes much more difficult when dealing with multiple phases of downtime. If we're able to reliably carry buffs over through the downtime phases, then we're fine. Even better if the downtime is less than 29 seconds, so we can continue an active combo over. Where the danger lies is if there's a section of long downtime right before a major burst window. Reopeners without buffs forces us to use our standard opener, which is a weaker burst window compared to our double Reawaken, which compared to other melee is already weak enough. If the phase is balanced around maximizing those burst windows, Viper becomes increasingly less valuable of a pick, and depending on the tuning, can potentially be the reason why DPS checks are much harder to meet. So in a way, the buffs to the other melee ended up being a slight nerf to Viper. While I don't think the discrepancy in damage will prevent Viper from clearing through, I definitely think they need to be more in line with Samurai, especially because that's the other selfish DPS job. But who knows, maybe the fight timings in Fru will end up suiting Viper pretty well. Only time will tell. So now let's go look at the new content coming with the patch. I won't go too much into detail on everything, so if you want to take a look, the link to the notes are in the description below. With the new patch, we have a new update to the MSQ called Crossroads, coming with its own new dungeon. Let's see where Square takes Dawntrail. We also got a new epilogue quest for the previous raid tier Pandemonium. If you liked that story, be sure to check it out. What I'm probably going to spend most of these next 2 weeks in is the new Extreme. The new Unreal Trial is out, this time with the Jade Stoa. Welcome back, Stormblood. We're also getting the new Alliance raid. Stock up on coins. We also now get the new Beast Tribe, now called Allied Societies. This will be done on combat jobs, so be sure to check this out, especially if you plan on leveling other jobs. New rewards have also been added for maps and for fates. If you like doing those, check those out too. The rest of the patch notes is a bunch of housing items and gear and different system upgrades, but for the sake of the video length and my overall sleep schedule, I won't cover these in this video. If you want, check out the patch notes in the description. Let me know your thoughts on the patch. I'm excited to get back in and play new content again. Thanks for watching.